Welcome everyone. My name's Stuart Mitchell. I'm from Australia, from an organisation called Educational Services Australia. We're a... Can you guys hear me okay? There we go. That's better. So yeah, my name's Stuart Mitchell. I'm from Education Services Australia, which is a not-for-profit company owned by the Ministers for Education in Australia. And we're tasked with rolling out educational technology that's in line with the national agenda. But I've also had the privilege of being part of the national task force for the safe and responsible use of AI in schools over the last year, which was an initiative set up by the ministers around April last year, and I played a small part in the development of a framework that was published in October, which was called the Australian Framework for the Safe and Ethical Use of AI in Schools. I'm going to ask your forgiveness on two fronts. It's late for me at night in Australia, so my body is running a little bit late. And the other thing is I was asked to jump in and facilitate this session at the last minute, so please bear with me. We're going to start by just doing a quick run around. We've got a really diverse group of participants in the panel today with a range of experiences. We're probably going to drift around the conversation, I think, because we have so much knowledge in a range of different capacities. But I might start down with yourself, Joe. Just a brief introduction, explaining who you are and...
Sure. My name is Joe Clement, and I'm a high school teacher in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia. Been teaching for, this is my 30th year. And Matt Miles and I co-authored a book called Screen Schooled. It's available wherever books are sold. We'll get more into it later.
Well, he just took my introduction, but yes, I'm also a high school teacher with Joe, and just to kind of context, we would call ourselves more tech skeptics. The subtitle of our book, Screen Schooled, was Two Veteran Teachers Expose How Screen Overuse is Making Our Kids Dumber.
Hello, I'm French, and I am the president of the Federation for European Education, and I'm an elected member of the Bureau of the Steering Committee of Education within the Council of Europe.
And hello. My name is Jeff Bradley. I worked for 7 years until just a couple of months ago when I stepped down as the director of the Commission on International Education at the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which accredits K-12 schools in 93 countries around the world and is responsible for overseeing a lot of the standards that schools are expected to follow, among which are AI standards. I'm close with some of the other accreditation agencies as well that work in the international school world, and that's some of the perspective that I want to bring into the conversation today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Jose Ogando. Everybody knows me by Majo. My colleague couldn't attend, so I think he got kicked out of the program, but I'm representing him. I lead a small boutique consultancy in education in the UK, in London. And for the last year and a half, we've been leading the AIforeducation.org initiative. This initiative is looking how we can build AI tools and products for developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa and as well as East Asia. So a lot of our work that we've been doing is ensuring that these tools are pedagogically sound, but also relevant for the context in developing countries. So that's me.
And so as you can see, we've got a really broad range of contexts and experiences, as I mentioned, but what I'm really interested is perhaps Joe and Matt, and I'll pass you this microphone as well so you can both talk simultaneously. I'm really curious to hear a little bit about that skepticism that underpins your book, and perhaps some of your thinking around what you're seeing in terms of the difference perhaps between the theory and the practice that's emerging in schools, in your context in the US, in the use of AI.
Thanks. Thanks very much. The first thing I want to point out is that very often educational policy is made by people who are well-intentioned, but often aren't experts in kids and in teaching. And a lot of times teachers are left out of the conversation. It would be interesting if there were a session today, for instance, just a panel of classroom teachers. What are your experiences? What are you seeing? Anytime a new initiative is going to be rolled out that's supposed to be transformative, that's supposed to reimagine how education works, and we're going to redesign the curriculum or whatever, teachers, in my mind, should be at the center of that discussion because they're the ones that are doing it every day. And so what we've heard, and as I mentioned, I've been teaching for 30 years, I've heard the word reimagined, revolutionary, redesigned, transformative, I don't know how many times, and all of those things, if you go back through whatever, have the potential to do all the good that we hear about. The potential is there, of course. The question is, what is the reality? And the reality is, as you might imagine, if you can imagine yourself being 16 and being handed a study guide in history class where you're supposed to go and look up a bunch of terms and whatever, and then somebody tells you, hey, you've got this tool where you can just type, upload your study guide and it'll do it for you. How do we think kids are going to use that? And that's how they use it. And they're usually very honest about their use. And they'll tell you that that's how they use it. Even though they understand, many of them at least have a rudimentary understanding of what is possible, we all looked to take shortcuts. And I think, teenagers, we work with teenagers, but I think this goes all the way down to the youngest kids also, are looking for some way to have to do less work. I mean, we all are, right? And I think that's the problem that we see, is that we keep hearing that this is going to be such a benefit. And we all want the same thing. We all want happier, healthier, smarter kids. We just don't see that happening very often when it comes to these sorts of technologies.
Yeah, in the last presentation, he kind of glossed over the quote, kids don't learn from AI, they rely on AI. And I came to learn about ChatGPT from the suspicion my kids suddenly started asking if I could load all the assignments digitally. I give them a paper copy and they want it digitally. So that's interesting. I've been doing this for 16 years, and why digitally? And what I learned is that way it was easier to copy and paste everything into ChatGPT, right? And that's how I learned about ChatGPT. It was too hard for them to actually type it, right? Now, to say that they could produce quality answers is one thing, but learning is very different than producing, right? We look at these technologies that are doing menial tasks well in the workforce and making production more efficient and lowering costs, and that's great. But what we're trying to do is teach, and that's by definition has to be a difficult process. For the brain to retain that knowledge and be able to use it, they have to struggle with it. It's not about just quickly producing an essay or we don't have quotas of essays we have to grade, and they're helping us meet that quota, right? They are thinking deeply about information, and you can't do that unless it's been internalized, right? So what we see is that reliance on AI is detrimental, or at least it has been so far, to learning.
Jeff, I might ask for your perspective on what we've just heard.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying in the sense that there's a confusion out there about what is the purpose of the tools that we now have at our disposal. I would say that the confusion and the maybe resistance to the terms like revolutionize and transform is a lack of, I think, shared understanding of a more fundamental question, which is, what is school for? And until we have a shared understanding, whether it's the community of families that send their children to this school, or the culture in which you're embedded that believes that schools are for this and that purpose, until you have a shared understanding that everybody can look at and say, yes, I agree, it's hard to have conversations about new tools and revolutionizing and transforming. Are you transforming because the current state of things doesn't answer the question, what is school for, adequately? So I think we're confused a little bit as a culture, and I'm speaking from the American perspective, and as an accreditation agency, an accreditation agency would say, in the case of NEASC, that I'm most familiar with, what is your school's shared understanding of high quality learning? So we start there as a kind of fundamental question. Do you have that definition of learning, a shared, that people all agree that's what this school is for? When you have that, I think it's a lot easier to say, okay, here's this wildly powerful new tool that, by the way, we didn't ask for. Schools did not put in an order to have ChatGPT dropped into their midst. Now, we're finding ways of incorporating it and dealing with it and managing it. And I would just say 2 words about that. One is guardrails and guidelines. And that guidelines and guardrails are where safety comes in and where proper usage. It's an amazingly powerful tool, we know, and it's not a single thing either, because there are so many applications, as we know. But unless we have a kind of common understanding that this enterprise of schooling, the reason we send and pay and have kids do this and have teachers show up is for the following reasons. Is it to get a job? Is it to promote democracy? Is it to promote literacy? Is it to feed children, as it is literally in many cases? It's a lot of things in many places. Let's have that conversation first, and then let's talk about how best to manage with AI.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, what that brings to my mind is one of the challenges we're facing in Australia is around trying to bridge some of those gaps you spoke about. So the framework that I mentioned earlier, which we've developed, which was fundamentally designed to give guidance to teachers and schools about how to use AI safely. And as I said, we were doing this time last year when the world was really fresh and emerging around AI. And the task force was a really interesting group of people. It was a mix of academics, policymakers, and one of the stumbling blocks we ran into in the second session was we're starting to go down the rabbit hole of the technology and thinking about, what is it going to do? How is it going to work? And we had to stop ourselves and ask, really, is this the best framing for us? Or should we instead frame this framework in terms of the outcomes that we want? Both pedagogically and from a learning perspective, from students' well-being perspective, human rights perspective. And that was a really powerful way, because what we've got now is a framework that is sort of resilient to the changes of technology. However, one of the challenges that sort of the organisation I'm with has been tasked with is now turning that into some guidance and directives and standards for software companies to implement those guardrails that you're talking about, right? And in some domains, that's quite straightforward. So security and privacy were quite relatively straightforward ones for us to tackle, and we weren't reinventing the wheel, we were learning from the rest of the world. But the area where we've really struggled has been how to, and I think this was picked up in one of the sessions this morning, how to assess whether an AI application is really being designed ethically, and how is it taking into consideration student well-being and their rights. And so things like transparency, explainability, these have been real challenges because there's this black box technology and we can't peer inside it, and it's also a technology that doesn't really have a concept of understanding meaning. It's as we've been hearing, it's a pattern making machine. So this is somewhere where, I mean, I'd be interested, Claude, in your perspective. I understand you're from the tertiary space, but really also the human rights and your thoughts on, I guess, that intersection of human rights, well-being, and AI. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I would react on the two interventions. The first is that definitely the new students, whatever their pupils or students, they not only rely on AI, but they get quite addict and dependent. And this is quite an issue regarding the topic enhanced safety. And regarding also the quality measures, we always, until now, put the student in the center of the net. But I think this is old-fashioned. We have to put the relationship between the teacher and the student in the center. And that is very important to enhance quality and therefore to enhance digital safety. And for the European point of view, I would say that we usually, not in Europe, but in the world, we usually split the competencies into two competencies, hard skills and soft skills. And in Europe, we like to split it in three competencies, hard skills, soft skills, and citizenship skills. And those citizenship skills, they are focused on human rights, critical thinking, sustainability, and that's very important. And I will conclude my intervention on this. I think we have to focus now, as you said, on the teachers, because teachers, they were supposed, and I speak on the part, they were supposed to have the knowledge. But now, are they assisting AI? Is AI the supposed to be having the knowledge? And what is going to be the role of the teacher? And this is very important because we are partner in the social dialogue with the European Union, and you are concerned. We are speaking about the salaries of the teachers. It's not the same to pay a teacher who has the knowledge than a teacher who is just an assistant of the knowledge given by the machine. And giving a look to our nice interpreters, we are very lucky to have human beings till now. But regarding interpretation and translation, 10 years ago, when you had a text to translate, it costed around 14 cents up to 20 cents the word. Now, to be done by human. Now, to be done by human is 10 cents to 14 cents, because you can have a document translated for 6 cents. And now, when you want to have your document with the ISO norm standard, it's just only 14 cents. That is to say that for 14 cents, you have 2 translators. So this is very important to also speak about the salaries of people.
Thank you. I want to come back a little bit in a moment and maybe explore that question that you raised around the relationship between teachers and students and how AI is kind of playing a role in that. But before we do, I think, Maria, it would be great to hear from you because you've got a very different perspective in terms of the markets that you're working in and the communities that you're engaged with. So we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, as everybody has said, like we are seeing that AI is being adopted faster than what we can imagine. In terms of AI development tools, we also see a rush to market because developers are saying, like putting AI tools, and a lot of like the choices of which tools to decide is let down to the teachers and to use like teacher ratings and aspects like that. With AI technology changing so fast, like evidence decision-making on which tools are really good is difficult. So we've been working in our initiative. We started working and thinking of the evidence piece that is needed so that these AI tools are really fit for purpose. And a lot of I think there are 2 aspects of generative AI that has brought into the news this generation of text and generation. And there's a lot of benchmarks, as we know, like all the foundational models, OpenAI, Gemini, compete each other based on whether they pass the MMLU benchmark. And all these benchmarks have defined, can it perform at a test level of high school or university in chemistry, in all the subjects you can imagine. We've seen a gap, and just echoing the idea or the focus on supporting the teachers, we've seen a gap that there's no benchmark that focuses on pedagogy. That's the first gap, is this content generated appropriate for my kids? So there's no benchmark. You say, you know, like, I want to create content for my kids. They are age 8. Is this the appropriate content for the level, right? So what we're working in is trying to close that gap and develop a benchmark that looks at the pedagogy and looks at all the different tasks that a teacher does to see how we can create benchmarks. And obviously the task is very difficult, and at the moment we don't have the solution because it's not a single task. The teachers assess, they give feedback, they plan classes, and for each of these ones, there could be a different benchmark that could be created. So maybe it's a series of benchmarks that are needed, but also you want benchmarks that can evaluate if the content that is being produced is appropriate for grade level 2 kids. So I agree, like, our perspective as well, and we have had actually 2 weeks ago with an international community supporting educators, a convening to discuss the benchmarking, and we all agree that the focus should be at the moment on the teacher and on guiding that. And I think, yeah, that's part of the benchmarking and the evidence piece. The other thing I think is worth mentioning is when we think about EdTech, and this is also something that I've been saying, is like EdTech has this connotation that EdTech is for learning and teaching, and that's all. But AI has expanded the capabilities of EdTech. So if a tool can automate grading, for example, like can free up time, like the tool should be evaluated because it automates grading. Does it save time? It's not, we shouldn't impose, you know, like, does it improve learning outcomes when a tool is just designed to save the time of the teacher, right? So there's a lot of like automation and processes improvements that, you know, like that have expanded the use cases in education. That is just worth considering that EdTech is no longer just about learning, it's also about processes around the education system, processes for head teachers, processes, you know, like performance review at school level and streamline, you know, like administrative tasks that are time consuming. So that's some thoughts.
Yeah, and that's a really, really interesting point. I mean, a significant problem in Australia, and from what I'm hearing around the world, is the time that teachers have available for teaching and the amount of time that is consumed by other non-teaching tasks. And I think that's an area that's possibly not being looked at as much in terms of the hype that's around AI in education. Yeah. John, Matt, really interested in your thoughts. Again, thinking about the role of EdTech in general historically as it's been delivering a lot of promises in the classroom. And in some ways, I think, has put screens between students and teachers in some contexts, particularly going back to when I started back in the very early 2000s with the emergence of sort of VLEs and LMSs, and you know, this idea that every student's going to be sitting in class with a screen between them and the teacher was a little bit baffling to me, and I had a degree of cynicism. I'm wondering what you're seeing in terms of coming back to Claude's point around the relationship between students and teachers. What's the roles that you can see for AI there, both in a positive but also in a challenging sense?
To me, maybe the scariest thing about AI is not, like, I don't really worry about AI taking my job or whatever. It's that you hear that about personalized learning and about how every kid is going to be, you know, if you have, you need a tutor, you have an AI assistant, or whatever. There is no kid that gets super excited about the confetti congratulations, you know, that you got the question right, you know, whatever that your AI tutor would generate for you. And what we know particularly about kids who are struggling is that the thing that matters more than anything else, and this is in educational research that goes back generations, it's the relationship between the teacher and student that matters most of all. So when I say scary, it's there's an equity piece that I think is at this point unaddressed, because what you hear is AI is going to go into some schools and work with some populations that where they're cash strapped, they don't have the resources, So AI can take the role of an individual tutor for every single kid. And very often, those are the kids who most desperately need the connection with a human being. In fact, we've seen when there were schools in Brooklyn, there are these automated learning systems that have been chunked out in the U.S. and probably around the world to schools, wholesale to schools where kids are essentially warehoused in a gymnasium and they're in a cube and they're supposed to go through their lessons all day long, whatever. And there was an example in Brooklyn where the students just walked out. We're not doing this anymore. And you hear these rebellion stories all over the place. And so I think we get seduced by the word personalized and the phrase personalized learning, individualized instruction. I haven't, it doesn't mean I guess it can't work. I haven't seen it work, but what I know for a fact is that students need the connection with the teacher maybe more than anything else.
Yeah, and we get back to the idea of we wrote the book primarily in response to that movement you were talking about. And what we were seeing in the classroom, not only the screens were distracting, but cell phones also. And what we see is, if you look at any measure of well-being since the advent of the smartphone, it's gone drastically down, right? Depression rates are all-time high, anxiety rates, suicidal ideation. All of those, our kids are very lonely and depressed, right? And they need, we were talking about the role of a teacher. It's more than just delivering content. There's the socio-emotional role, right? The social cultural role. And when we're dealing with kids who are so depressed, right? I mean, I've had at least half a dozen students hospitalized for suicidal ideation just this year so far, right? I mean, see kids isolated, right? Anxiety, a lot of the 504 and IEPs for anxiety disorders are kids can bring in their noise-canceling headphones and stay distracted, disconnected. They're more disconnected, right? And what we know is that human connection, we haven't evolved, since we invented, Netscape and other technologies, we haven't evolved to not need human connection. So that's that social cultural piece. My fear with AIs is even if you do have a device that can answer questions for you, right? That's a missed opportunity for a connection with another human being, be it the teacher, be it a peer, right? And if we keep creating and developing these rabbit holes for our kids to go down in isolation, what is the impact is that going to have on their social emotional well-being? That's a thought that worries me with AI.
You said a word that we are going maybe in a few years say that is a very important word, fear. AI doesn't know the word fear. We fears, AI doesn't fear. We know that we are going to die one day. AI has eternity in front. And I'm not so optimistic like you regarding the teachers. In Europe, we have a shortage of 2 million teachers. And we are speaking, fortunately or unfortunately, from wealthy country. Look at the non-wealthy country. They are putting money not in training teachers, but having more AI, more content. So I think that we really have to strengthen the relationship between teacher and student to protect also the job of teachers. I'm not so optimistic like you.
Following up a little bit, following up on the idea of how do we go about managing AI, because it's here, and it's here to stay, and we know that. I would advise anybody who asks me now to find where are schools that care deeply about proper use of AI, where are they turning? To whom are they looking? And on what are they depending? And one of the scariest graph representations this morning, I think it was Professor Fidel who showed the graph line of technology always outpacing individuals and policies, and companies were next in line behind the people. But policies are the last things. So the technology is here. We have it. It's in our pockets. It's in our kids' pockets. How do we manage it with policies? And how do we use it? Because maybe it can enhance the relationships between students and teachers. I don't know. Does it? Who's doing it? I would say look to where those schools are that care deeply about proper use and safe use. And one of the places they're turning right now is a fellow accreditation association based in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, called the Middle States Association, MSA. And they've developed something called RAIL, R-A-I-L, which is Responsible Artificial Intelligence for Learning. And it's a set of protocols and standards, basically, that schools need to meet and adhere to in order to then receive this credential that says we are living by these expectations, which of course are evolving, but it includes lots of safeguards. And it includes you need to have a policy in your school that says here is how we are going to treat this technology of artificial intelligence. Here's how we're going to treat generative AI. Here's how this affects our assessment policy. Combined with that, of course, needs to be involvement of teachers in developing the policies and then also in educating the teachers and the parents and the students. Here's what the policy says now. Here is what we believe about use of this tool in our school. I want to say one other thing, and it was mentioned again earlier today as well, that we can take a lesson, I think, from this fast-changing environment from social media and what happened. And how social media, when it arrived, seemed like this amazing promise to connect the whole world, to improve access, to promote democracy and the voices of people. Can and does it still do that? Sure. But this promise has turned, in many ways, into a perversion that is affecting relationships, that is affecting democracies in very negative ways that we did not anticipate. So let's learn the lesson. And I, again, want to talk about guardrails and guidelines if we're going to use AI in schools.
Fantastic. And yeah, look, I think we're running towards the end of our session. And so I think for me, some things that have emerged out of this conversation, as well as the sessions this morning that are really interesting, thinking back to the history of edutech or edtech that I've been involved in, going back to, as I said, the start of this century. I think what's the kind of light at the end of the tunnel for me is the fact that we're having these conversations. At other points in time, we've seen this immense hype about the promises of technology in the classroom and a rush to get it in there and a rush to believe it's going to solve our problems. Whereas now, and I think it did start to a degree with that open letter from the AI engineers last year that really kind of stopped the world in its tracks. I think this is a positive thing, that we're stopping, we're thinking about the risks, we're thinking about the human dimension, we're thinking about the relationships, we're thinking about the important aspects of what it is to be human, as we've got for the framing for this conference. And we're most importantly thinking about the well-being of students and carefully considering the role of AI and therefore implementing some of these standards, guardrails and protocols, and really trying to say to the industry, hey, slow down a bit and we want to make sure that what we're doing here is safe and it's having a positive impact. So I want to thank each of my panelists. We all came together pretty quickly at short notice, but it's been a wonderful discussion, so thank you all, and thanks for coming and listening.